Very good morning to all of your students. The topic of discussion today is Dr. Johnson as a critic. Though Dr. Johnson earned a good reputation as a discerning critic, he considered it to be always a handmaid to be ranked among the subordinate and instrumental arts, as the purpose of literary criticism is to provide a keen and correct understanding of life through the interpretation of literature. A literary critic, in Dr. Johnson's view, cannot keep his literary awareness isolated from the religion and moral structure of his thinking. It is therefore but natural that he should emphasize biography as a prelude to literary criticism, the study of the man before the study of his work. John Wayne sees Johnson's criticism as evolving at a strategic moment in literary history as a hinge between neoclassic and modern criticism. Johnson indeed believed in the neoclassical tenets of discipline, regularity, rationality, and looked on emotion with suspicion. It is no wonder that he could not appreciate Milton's imaginative flights or his pastoral mode, for they were far removed from probability. He finds Lycidas to be both aesthetic and moral failure. In this poem, Johnson declares there is no nature, for there is no truth. There is no art, for there is nothing new. Its form is that of the pastoral, e.g., vulgar and therefore disgusting. He is not in sympathy with the pastoral framework in an elegy because it makes grief artificial. As a champion of the rhyme and the heroic couplet, Johnson cannot appreciate the blank verse of Milton because of its irregular pause and declamatory tone. But his view on versification does not prevent him from being the greatness of Milton's Paradise Lost. He sees it primarily not as a poem but as a moral and religious work with a great purpose of justifying the ways of God to man. In spite of his political and theological differences with Milton, his diagnosis of Milton's weak and strong points are far more accurate. Milton's genius was suitable for an epic but unsuitable for shorter works. Comus, he thinks, is great as a poem but weak as a play. Johnson's criticism of Lycidas is perhaps the only example of wrong-headedness. Johnson points out that Lycidas has neither art nor nature. He rightly points out that where there is leisure for fiction, there is little grief. Johnson has a temperamental dislike of pastoral poetry, and his dismissal of Lycidas has the same reason as his dismissal of Spenser's Shepherd's Calendar. Dr. Johnson points out the merits and demerits of Paradise Lost. He praises the design of this epic, but he finds that the poem lacks in human appeal, and so it excites little natural curiosity or sympathy in the reader. Besides, the absence of visual images in this epic also guards on his critical sensibility. He is also critical of Paradise Lost because it is written in blank verse. Dr. Johnson cannot appreciate the music of blank verse because of his defective ear. Besides, his ear is attuned to the soft music of heroic couplet and rhymes of Dryden's and Pope's poetry. He respects the blank verse, but he appreciates the heroic couplet. Poetry may subsist without rhyme, but English poetry will not often please. Blank verse has neither the easiness of the process of prose nor of melody of numbers. It is this which enables him to admire the poetry of Dryden and Pope. Dr. Johnson lacks in historical imagination. He judges a poet or his work of art in a historical perspective. He judges poets by the literary standards of his own age. He justifies a defective meter in one of Dryden's poems on the ground of the contemporary irregularity of meter. He says that Dryden may be considered the father of English criticism. He points out that it was Dryden who taught the people to judge a work of art by subjecting it to the touchstone of principle. He recognizes Dryden's superiority in judgment, brilliance, and comprehensiveness. Dr. Johnson is a bitter critic of Swift. Johnson's tolerance stops at certain audacities, and his taste is offended by certain innovations that are too personal. He finds those things in Swift and so he criticizes him bitterly. But he is unjust in his criticism of Swift, whose horse-whipping manner secretly worries him. Dr. Johnson is critical of A Tale of a Tub because it presents truth allegorically, and Johnson has faith in a stated morality and not in enacted morality. Besides, Johnson is bitterly critical of Swift on political as well as religious grounds. Johnson's personal bias appears even in the evaluation of Gray. He finds that the the odes of Gray are marked by glittering accumulations of ungraceful ornaments. They strive rather than please. Now here, however, are Johnson's shortcomings more glaring than in his treatment of Swift. Johnson was temperamentally unfit for an unbiased judgment of Gray as a man. Johnson's own impressions being that he was a dilettante, offended, I beg your pardon, affected, fastidious, and somewhat effeminate. Johnson did not like Gray's new idiom of expression and the strangeness of his subject matter. He described the progress of poesy as a hypenderic on a stilts and the alliterations in the bard as too trifling for a poem which aimed at sublimity. He describes the odes as a kind of cumbrous splendor that we wish away, but he finds elements of unquestioned greatness approved by the common sense of the plain man, uncorrupted with literary prejudices or subtle refinements of taste in Gray's Elysee. But he also appreciates the Elysee for different reasons. Johnson's gnomic praise of Gray's Elysee shows that Johnson's judgment is right. The book abounds with the images which find a mirror in every mind, and with sentiments to which every bosom returns an echo. Except in certain cases like those of Milton, Gray, Collins, and Swift, Johnson's temperamental, political, or sectarian prejudices are not allowed to color seriously his literary judgments. He appreciates Dryden and Pope as poets of good sense, original, and sound technique. The flaw in his biography and some of his literary criticism of Milton, Collins, and Gray proceeds from Johnson's Tory prejudices. He is at his best when he is in perfect accord with poets like Dryden and Pope. He is unfair to Milton because the latter's republicanism was distasteful to him. Personal biases from which Dr. Johnson suffers appear in his evaluation of Milton, Swift, and Gray. With all literary prejudices and all religious and political biases, Johnson made a notable contribution to the enrichment of literary criticism. Elkins has pointed out, he has handed down a body of critical judgments up to them unsurpassed in their wide scope, their original biographical details, their keen and dispassionate psychological analysis with certain limits. Thank you.